Back in the library. It's been a little bit since we've been out here. We're doing a lot of more outdoor adventures, but it's good to be back in our typical ambience. Check that out. Pretty sick. Um, I'm standing in front of the typewriter. There's a fire. It's cozy. And while it's cozy, we're going to be reading more Fairest. Check that out. I don't know about you, but I want to hear more about the moon people, the lunars. Into the next part. That one's being difficult, said Channery, bobbing her foot to the fast-paced orchestral piece and pulling a glossy red cherry between her teeth. Leaning over the railing, she tossed the stem over the balcony edge, letting it flutter down to the ballroom floor and become lost in the kaleidoscope of gowns and elaborate hairstyles. Beside her, Levanna did not lean or jog her foot or even attempt to discern which suitor her sister was referring to. Her attention was fixed on Everett, stone still and imposing beside the ballroom staircase, in an identical uniform to every other guard, and yet looking somehow more like royalty than hired brawn. His expression was composed and stern. He had not glanced at her once since the ball had begun. "Oh, I see," said Channery, flicking her eyelashes in Levanna's direction, then down at Everett. "Now that you have your own toy to play with, you won't bother listening to me rant about mine." "He isn't a toy." "No? A puppet, then." Levanna clenched her fists at her sides. "He isn't a puppet, either." Channery smirked, turning away from the railing. She beckoned toward one of the servants. At their side, in a moment, the servant dropped to one knee and held a tray up above his head so that Channery could inspect his offerings. A dozen cordial glasses were set into a spiral upon the tray, each containing a different colored beverage. Channery selected one that was bright orange and syrupy thick. "Stay here in case I want another," she said, turning back to her sister. "If he isn't a toy or a puppet, then why in the name of Cypress Blackburn have you spent the past month dressed up like his simpleton wife?" Heat flooded Levanna's cheeks, but her glamour didn't flicker. Always cool, always composed, always cheerful and delicate and lovely. That was how she remembered Solstice Hale from their brief interactions. That was how she would have everyone see her now. "The poor woman died in childbirth, said Levanna. "I'm paying homage." "You're playing with his head," a sly grin crept over Channery's face. "Which would make me rather proud if you'd set your sights a bit higher. A palace guard? Honestly. Once you're done with him, perhaps you can make eyes at one of the gardeners." Levanna cut her gaze toward her sister. "You're quite the hypocrite. Just how many palace guards have kept you company over the years?" "Oh, countless." Channery took a sip from her drink, and her cunning smile lingered when she lowered it and inspected the poppy-colored contents again. She gave it a discerning sniff. "But never at the detriment of having fun elsewhere. Ideally, a lady will have 3 toys at once, one to romance her, one to bed her, and one to adorn her with very expensive jewelry." Levanna's eye began to twitch. "You have never had Everett." Laughing heartily, Channery set the barely touched drink back on the tray and selected an aquamarine choice, dusted with something white and shimmery on top. The servant did not move. "That's true, though I'm sure he would be much less problematic than Constable Dabrowski," she sighed. The minx. Dabrowski. Levanna squinted down into the flurry of dancers. It took a while, but she finally spotted the constable dancing with a young gentleman whose name escaped her. One of the family heirs, she was sure. "Perhaps the difficulty is in his personal preferences." Channery flicked her fingers. Oh no, it's Levanna speaking, sorry. "Perhaps the difficulty is in his personal preferences." Channery flicked her fingers. "I've come to learn that he isn't particular, except evidently when he is not interested in his queen. I can't understand that. I've been throwing hints at him since last sunset." Glancing down, Levanna saw that the servant's arm was beginning to shake. The drinks in his cordial glass were vibrating. She selected a beverage that looked like melted chocolate. "You may go." Channery snatched up a daffodil yellow liqueur before the servant could escape, holding both drinks in her hand as she leaned over the balcony rail. She trained her focus on the constable again, not in a swoony or dreamy way, but as if she were analyzing a war strategy. "If you want him so much," said Levanna, "why don't you just brainwash him into wanting you? It would be much simpler." "You say that as if you have experience in such matters." Gut tightening, Levanna couldn't keep her attention from darting to Everett again. Stoic, statuesque Everett. Did his eyes ever follow her around a room like hers followed him? Did he ever sneak glimpses of her when she wasn't looking? If so, she had yet to catch him in it, not once since their first kiss in her chambers. "Manipulating your prey is an easy way to cheat at the game," said Channery. She dipped her tongue into the blue glass, coating it with silvery powder, and swallowed. Her expression became surprisingly pleased. "But I don't want to win that way. I will win when I go into lunar history as the most desirable queen to ever walk these hallways." "The most undiscerning queen, anyway. Don't you ever want to just fall in love?" "Love? What a child you are!" With no apparent premeditation, Channery downed both of her drinks in 2 successive gulps. She balked at the combined taste, then started to laugh. "Love!" She screamed out into the dance floor so loud that a few of the musicians startled and the music blustered momentarily before picking up again. "Love is a conquest! Love is a war!" A few people down below had stopped dancing to gawk at their mad queen. Levanna shrank away from her. "Here is what I think of love!" Channery threw the glasses into the throngs as hard as she could. One of them shattered onto the polished floor. The other hit Constable Dabrowski's partner in the eye. He yelped and held up his hands. Too late. A spiteful giggle rose up inside Channery and was just as quickly smothered by a dainty hand pressed over her mouth. "Oops!" she chirped, then laughed in earnest and pushed herself away from the railing. Aghast, Levanna trailed after her. They ignored the guests, who dropped into bows and curtsies as they passed. The queen looked positively fanatical with her laughter. "And you think that's going to endear your constable to you?" said Levanna, abandoning her own untouched drink on a sideboard. "Assaulting his dance partners?" "It can't be any more absurd than your tactic," Channery rounded on her, bringing them to a sudden stop on the winding ramp that swirled down around the ballroom, connecting the main floor to the first balcony. "Do you really think that by changing your glamour to look like his dead wife and manipulating him a couple times a day, you're going to make him fall in love with you?" Levanna bristled. "I don't need to do anything. He's already in love with me, and I love him. But I suppose you wouldn't understand." Smirking, Channery ducked her head closer and lowered her voice. "If you truly believe that he loves you, then why manipulate him at all? Why not let him keep his own emotions unmolested? In fact, why not show him what you truly look like?" She snorted. Probably not like that. "Or are you too afraid he'll run screaming from the room if you do that?" Rage burst inside Levanna's head. She was suddenly trembling, and even her glamour was showing the anger. It had been a long time since she'd lost such control. Breathing slowly, she forced herself to relax. Her sister insulted others so that she could lift herself up in comparison. She was to be pitied, if anything. "He is still in mourning," Levanna said, pacing her words. "Because I love him, I am trying to make his transition as easy on him as possible." I just spilled a little bit of my old-fashioned. Too much sugar. That's on me. Man, it's almost like I have coasters for a reason. I should probably use that. There we go. Let's not put that right on the edge. I can see that being a problem. "Because I love him, I am trying to make this transition as easy on him as possible." Eyes twinkling, Channery lifted her head to one side. "Oh, yes, we can all see how easy you're making this transition for him." Levanna lifted her chin. "I don't care what you think. I'm going to marry him. When he's ready, I'm going to marry him." Channery raised a hand and patted Levanna on the cheek. Though it was a gentle touch, Levanna still recoiled from the gesture. Then you are an even bigger idiot than I realized, baby sister. Dropping her hand, she strategically lowered the straps of her dress and strolled past Levanna toward the dance floor. Levanna shut her eyes, trying to drown out the music that crashed and rolled against her, the mocking laughter of the guests, her sister's taunting words. Channery didn't understand. Levanna wasn't only trying to replace Everett's dead wife, she was going to show him that she was the better choice to begin with. She would be more loving, more dedicated, more enigmatic. She would make him forget that he ever had another lover at all. But her stomach was still in chains when she opened her eyes and glanced toward the dance floor. At all the beautiful girls and beautiful boys in their beautiful clothes and their beautiful glamours, perhaps it was not enough to take on the glamour of Everett's wife. Not if she was going to be better than her in every way. She slinked backward, drawing away from the twirling, writhing crowd until her back collided with the wall. A tapestry swayed against her shoulder. A glowing orb over her head gave a faint halo to the few couples that were loitering on the ramp. She thought of Solstice, the woman he had loved so very much. Levanna decided that her hair would be just a bit glossier, and added a hint of red on a whim for contrast, for allure. Her eyes would be larger with more depth of color, her lashes thicker and her complexion shimmering and flawless. Her bust would be a little fuller, and her waist a little trimmer, and her lips would be a little... No, not a little. Her lips would be strikingly, vividly red. When Everett looked at her, he would see perfection. When any man looked at her, he would see perfection. Maybe her sister was right. Maybe she truly was hideous. But so long as she could deceive everyone, what did it matter? She would make even that constable want her if she chose to. She waited until the glamour had fully pieced together. These visions were what she was good at. The ability to make her glamour so real that she had no use of her true skin anymore. Confident, once more, she glided down to the base of the ramp. A few heads swiveled toward her as she floated among the dancers. She did not head straight for Everett, but rather curtsied and smiled at the nobles who sent her curious glances, making a slow but steady trail through the ballroom. Even so, she was almost close enough to touch him before his absent gaze locked onto hers. For a moment, he seemed to peer right through her. Then there was bewilderment as his dark eyes scooped down her body before latching onto her face again. Then a strange mixture. Desire, she was sure of it, but also, perhaps, fear? She did not know what to make of that. Sir Hale? She said, and in that moment she made the lightning choice to even improve upon her voice. Like a lullaby, she thought, I will speak like whimsical bird song. I would like to take a stroll by the lake. Will you accompany me? He wrestled with the request for all of 2 heartbeats before dropping his head in a silent nod. His station commanded that he follow at a respectful distance behind her as they traversed through the palace. Palace corridors and emerged onto the stone portico that divided the palace from the gardens and lakeshore. Artemisia Lake glinted in the darkness, reflecting the lights of the palace back up to the sky, along with an entire ocean's worth of stars. Levanna had often imagined that she could dive into the water and find herself floating in space. When I was a child, I believed there would come a time when I would enjoy these parties, she said, trusting that Everett was listening, although he walked some paces behind her. But now I can see that they will never grow any less tiresome. Political dalliances, all under the guise of innocent amusement. She smiled to herself, pleased with how wise and mature her words sounded. She felt more self-assured with her improved glamour than she had in months, maybe her whole life. I would much rather be out here, enjoying a pristine evening. She turned back. Everett lingered a dozen paces away, his face cast in shadow. Wouldn't you? Princess. The word sent a shiver down her spine, for it was full of everything she'd seen in his eyes in the ballroom. Bewilderment and desire and fear. Why do you stand so far away, Sir Hale? I can protect you well enough from here, Your Highness. Can you? And what if an assassin were to fire a shot into my heart from one of these windows? Would you manage to get to me in time? It is not an assassin I fear you need protection from. She reached for the chain around her neck. Then, what do I need protection from? She took a hesitant step toward him. Yourself, he said firmly. Then he stepped back and said with much less conviction, or me, if you come any closer. She paused. There was something different about him tonight, a strange reaction to her glamour. She wasn't sure if this was what she'd hoped for or not. Since the day he'd come to her chambers, they had shared 100 stolen moments, a brush of skin outside the dining hall, a possessive hand on her waist as she disappeared into her bedchambers for the night, a hasty, desperate kiss in the servants' hall before the changing of the guard. But Levanna was not so naive as to pretend that every moment had required mental pressure from her, reshaping his thoughts to match her own, forcing her own desire upon him, reminding him again and again that he loved her. He loved her. And 6 times, he had broken the guard's code of conduct. The rule was that he was not to speak unless one of his superiors bid him, to tell her that this had to stop. He had told her that he was confused and heartbroken and he couldn't imagine what had come over him, and he hadn't meant to take advantage of her, and he didn't blame her at all. But they had to stop. They had to stop. Until he was kissing her again. So far, tonight, Levanna had not had to manipulate his emotions. So far, it was only her glamour that had cajoled him. What do you mean, I need protection from you? Your Highness. The fear faded away. Now he looked only tired. Why are you torturing me like this? She drew back. Torturing you? Every time I'm away from you, when I'm off duty, taking care of my baby girl, my thoughts are solid. I know myself. I know my heart. I know that my wife is dead. But she gave me a beautiful gift before she left, and I'm thankful for that. I know that I am loyal to the crown, and I will serve faithfully as long as I can. And I know that I care for you as a guard must care for his princess. And as a friend, I suppose. You are my... But when you're near... he continued, and the interruption shocked Levanna more than anything else that night. A guard never interrupted a member of the aristocracy, and certainly never a member of the royal family. My thoughts get all messed up again. You look like Solstice, and I get confused. My heart pounds so fast around you, but not in a happy way or a loving way. It's as though my body belongs to someone else, and I can't keep my hands off you. Even though I know how wrong it is, stars above! I could be executed for this. No, I would never let that happen to you. But you are the one doing this to me. She froze. Aren't you? He whispered. This is all a manipulation, a trick played on the poor, weak-minded guard. Levanna shook her head and scrambled closer to him, pulling his hands into hers. I don't think of you like that at all. Then why are you doing this? Because I love you! And you love me, but you're too honorable to... I don't love you! He screamed, and the words struck her like 1,000 shards of ice. Or at least, I don't think I do. But you've got my mind so turned around I can hardly tell what's real anymore! She attempted a gentle smile. Don't you see? That's what love is supposed to feel like. All these conflicting emotions and bouts of passion that you can hardly control, and this constant twisting feeling in your stomach like you can't decide if you want to run away from that person or if you want to run away with them. His face was tense, like he was trying to hash out his words before he yelled again. You're wrong, Princess. I don't know what you're describing, but it isn't love. Tears pricked at her eyes. When you said that I needed protection from you, I didn't think that you had intended to break my heart. when I would do anything for you, Everett. Pulling away from her, he curled his fingers into his thick coils of hair. That wasn't my intention, Princess. I don't think you understand what you're doing, how wrong it is. But you can't continue. In the end, you'll grow tired of this charade, and I will be punished for taking advantage of you. Don't you see that? I told you, I won't let that happen. He dropped his hands. And you think the Queen will listen to you? She'll have to. She herself has had countless affairs with royal guards. She is not 16 years old! Levanna wrapped her arms around herself like a shield. You think I'm just a naive child? Yes, naive and confused and lonely. She forced herself to hold his gaze. And what about beautiful? He flinched and looked away. You find me beautiful, don't you? Irresistible even. Princess, answer me! I can't, because I'm right! He said nothing. Levanna swallowed. Marry me, Everett. His eyes snapped back toward her, horrified, but she plowed on. Marry me, and you will be a prince. She cannot touch you. No. No. Solstice. And my darling Winter. Oh, shit! His kid is named Winter! Are you kidding me? I didn't see that coming! Holy shit! Oh my god! Winter's the name of his daughter! Like the summer solstice and then the winter solstice! I didn't see that coming! Oh shit! Oh my god! Oh my god! So in the last book when Winter said my father would have given me whatever, she was talking about Everett! Oh my god! Oh, what a twist! I did not see that shit coming! Holy shit! Oh my god, I'm like actually sweating. I'm like actually sweating from this revelation. Oh my god. Oh my god. Her heart stuttered, and she was surprised at how quickly her jealousy returned, how much it hurt. Winter? Who's Winter? He laughed without humor, pulling both hands down his face. She's my daughter. You believe that you love me, and yet you haven't even asked what I named my 1-month-old child? Don't you see how insane that is? She gulped. Winter, solstice. Though they did not have seasons on Luna, she knew enough of the earthen calendar to be familiar with how the words fit together. She remembered, too, the little baby blanket embroidered with a snowy scene. He never meant to forget his wife, not for as long as he lived. Winter, she said, wetting her lips. Your daughter will be a princess with all the riches and privileges afforded to a girl of her station. Don't you want that for her? I want her to be surrounded by love and respect, not whatever games the people in that ballroom come up with to entertain themselves. Not whatever it is you're trying to do to me. Clenching her fists, Levanna strode forward so that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. Winter will have a mother, and you will have a wife, and I will love you both better than she ever could have. Shaking with fury and determination, Levanna marched around him, back toward the palace. It took him a long time, but upon realizing that the princess could not be left unprotected, he followed. We're taking a moment to discuss this. Winter is Everett's kid? Yeah, that makes sense because like they wouldn't just have a child thrown in for with no fucking consequence. But I would have thought, like honestly, my thought was that the kid was Cinder. I thought the kid was Cinder because like Channery isn't gonna have a kid. So I thought that are Winter and Cinder siblings? Because the thought that's coming to me right now is I thought that Channery would never have a kid. She has all these suitors, but she's not going to have kids, and that she would take Everett's kid away from Everett just to fuck with Levanna, and then that's the kid that gets saved and is the true heir to the throne because everyone thinks that it's Channery's kid and is the next person to be in line. Right? Okay. What if Everett and Levanna hook up, have a kid, and then that's the kid that Channery takes? Or, more interestingly, what if Channery and Everett get it on, and then that's the kid, and then they're half-siblings? So many questions! I did not see that coming! I've got so much to think about! I'm still sweating. I had to go turn on the AC in my apartment, because that revelation got me. The resistance started to leave Everett after that, and Levanna hoped he was beginning to forget his wife. Or, not forget her, but forget that she was a different woman altogether. His eyes frequently took on a hollow stare when he was in her presence, and when other members of the court were nearby, he was as unreadable as some extinct first-era alphabet. He gave away nothing. He could have been a stranger. Which she knew was wise of him. He'd been right before. If her sister wanted to accuse him of taking advantage of the princess, it would be in her right to do so. Levanna wasn't worried about it, though. Channery had her own romantic conquests to worry about, and, besides, she had been making eyes at older men since she was even younger than Levanna was now. No, she was not worried. Especially in those moments when they were finally alone, those borrowed spaces of time when he was hers, entirely hers. She began to loosen her mental grip of him, little by little, and to her relief and her joy, his response to her only became braver. His hands more possessive, his caresses more daring. The first night they spent together, he whispered a single word into her hair. Soul, simultaneously filled with pain and pleasure, joy and rage, Levanna had grit her teeth and held him closer. When the dome brightened over the white city the following morning, Levanna let him sleep until the servant entered to bring her breakfast. Mortified and distraught, Everett lay in bed frozen, while Levanna ordered the servant to cut and butter her rolls, slice her fruit, prepare the tea that she had no intention of drinking. When the servant had gone, Everett scrambled from the sheets. She saw the moment when he took in the spots of blood on the white cotton. How quickly he turned away, how hastily he pulled on his clothes, muttering curses beneath his breath. Sitting up against her feathered pillows, the tray settled across her lap. Levanna dropped a berry onto her tongue. It was sour. Channery would have called for the servant to take it back, and the thought crossed her mind, but she buried it. She was not her sister. Not this, Everett said without facing her. I didn't think you would push it this far. I didn't think... He fisted a hand into his hair, cursing again. I'm so sorry, princess. She bristled, annoyed, but tried to play it off as a joke. For leaving before breakfast? Levanna cooed. I will have another tray sent for you if you're hungry. No, my daughter. She'll have been with the nanny all night. I hadn't planned on... Levanna glared at his muscled back as he pulled his shirt over his head. I will pay for the nanny's additional time. Stay, Everett. She smoothed the blankets beside her. He sat on the edge of the bed to pull on his shoes, shaking his head. Then, hesitating, he dropped the first shoe back to the floor. His shoulders slumped into defeat. Levanna grinned as she sucked the berry juice left on her finger, and was preparing to scoot over to make room for him against the headboard, when he started to speak, his voice thick with misery. I tried to leave a week ago. Levanna hesitated, pulling her finger out of her mouth. Leave? We were packed and everything. I was going to take Winter to one of the lumber sectors and learn a new trade. She squinted at the back of his head. A new trade doing what? Toppling trees? Maybe. Or at a lumber mill. Or even making wood moldings. I don't know. I just wanted to be anywhere but here. Aghast, she set the tray aside. Then why didn't you? If you're so desperate to get away. Her Majesty wouldn't allow it. She froze. I gave her my resignation and she laughed. She said she was having far too much fun watching you make a fool of yourself to let me go now. She even threatened to send the guards after me and Winter if I dared to leave without her consent. Levanna shivered. I don't care what she thinks. I do. She's my queen. She controls me as much as you do. I don't control you. He looked at her finally, but his expression was bewildered. What do you think this is? I'm barely... She dug her nails to her palms. You want me as much as I want you. I see it in your eyes every time you touch me. He laughed, a cruel sound, so different from the warm, kind laughter she remembered. Gesturing at her face, he yelled. You're wearing my wife's face! She was gone for 2 weeks and I was miserable, and then she was back and I... But she's not back. It's you. It's just you! And you don't think that's manipulative? Shoving the blankets aside, Levanna scrambled into the robe left on the vanity chair. It's my face now. This is who I am. And you can't tell me what happened last night was a mistake, that you didn't want it. I never wanted this! The court is talking, and the other guards, the rumors about us. What does that matter? I love you, Everett. You don't even know what the word means. I wish I could make you understand that. He gestured to the empty space between them. Whatever this fantasy is that you've built in your head, none of it is real. You are not my wife, and I need to go be with my daughter, the only part of her I have left. Sorry about that. Levanna cinched the belt tight, then stood there, shaking with anger as she watched him pull on his boots. You will marry me. He paused briefly before snapping the last buckle at the top of his boots. Princess, please, not again. Tonight. He stared at the floor for a long time, a painfully long time. She didn't know what she expected to see when he finally lifted his head, but the nothingness surprised her. They stared at each other for a painful, hollow moment, until it occurred to Levanna that he had not said no. She gulped, pressing forward. I will have an officiant, and we will meet in the Sun Chapel at nightfall. His gaze again fell to the floor. Bring your daughter, if you'd like. She should be there, I think, and the nanny to watch her. She pulled her hair over one shoulder, feeling better about their argument already. How many of his annoying points this would solve. She would be his wife. He could no longer say that she wasn't. She would be the mother to his child. And the rumors would stop, for no one would dare speak ill of the princess's husband, the queen's brother-in-law. Well? She said, daring him to say no. Already she was feeling for the energy that surrounded him, ready to bend him to her will if he denied her. This was for his own good. This was the only way to solidify their family, their happiness. Releasing the top of his boot, Everett slowly stood. His absent expression had turned sad. Sad? No. Sympathetic. He felt sorry for her. She frowned, casting a wall around her heart. You have a chance to find love, Princess. Real love. Don't throw that away on me. I beg you. She crossed her arms over her chest. I have already found love. I have shared my bed with him, and tonight he will be my husband. She attempted to smile, but her confidence was waning. He had bruised it too many times, and she didn't want to face rejection now. She didn't want to force him into this. But even as she thought it, she knew that she would, if it was the only way. Everett pulled his weapon holster over his head, his knife hanging on one hip, his gun on the other. A guard. Her guard. Well? Levanna demanded. What am I, fucking American? I am, Levanna. Levanna demanded. Do I have a choice? He sneered. She sneered. Of course you have a choice. It is yes or no. Levanna ignored the twist in her stomach that told her she was lying. He would not say no, and it wouldn't matter. But still, she was surprised at how vulnerable she felt as the seconds ticked past. He wouldn't say no, would he? She held her breath and sent just a subtle tenderness into his thoughts, just a warm reminder that they were meant to be together forever. He shuddered, and she wondered if he knew she was doing it. She stopped and watched his shoulders relax. Everett? She hated the whine in her voice. Marry me, Everett. He did not meet her eyes again as he crossed to her bedroom door. As it pleases you, Your Highness. Gonna need a little bit more of this, please and thank you. And then just a little tea. Just a little tea. Just a little tea. A little tea. Just a little tea. The officiant wrapped the gold ribbon around Levanna's wrist, explaining the significance of their union, the magnitude of the occasion as he tied the knot. He then moved to Everett, taking a second ribbon from the dash on the altar and knotting it around Everett's wrist. Levanna watched closely as the shimmering ribbon settled against his dark skin. His arm was so much broader than hers, making her bones seem bird-like in comparison. Knotting the two ribbons together, said the officiant, taking them into his fingers and tying them once, then twice, symbolizes the unity of bride and groom into one being and one soul on this, the 27th day of April in the 109th year of the Third Era. Releasing the ribbons, he let the knot dangle between their arms. Levanna stared at the knot and tried to feel connected, unified, like her soul had just merged with Everett's. But she felt only a yawning distance between them, a black hole of silence. He had barely spoken since arriving at the chapel. In the second pew, the baby began to mewl. Everett turned and, annoyed at the distraction, Levanna followed the look. The nanny was shushing the child, bouncing the girl gently in her lap, and Levanna recognized the embroidered blanket that the child had been swaddled in, the pale snowscape, the red mittens. Soul's handiwork. Her teeth grounded against each other. Will you be excuse me. You will be exchanging rings? Said the officiant. Levanna turned back and realized that neither Everett nor the officiant were still paying the fussy child any attention. Everett nodded, though the action was curt. Levanna glanced at him from the corner of her eye, surprised. She had not brought a ring. Turning, Everett held his palm out toward the only guests other than the nanny and little Winter. That guard friend of his, Garrison Clay, who was there with his wife, a plain girl with strawberry blonde hair, and their own child. A tow-headed toddler boy who had spent the ceremony bobbling down the aisle while his mother hissed for him to come back, gave up, chased after him. Although their presence seemed to indicate that Everett was taking this ceremony with some levity, Levanna couldn't help but be annoyed at everything about this family. When they first arrived, Garrison had pulled Everett aside. They seemed to be arguing about something, and she was certain he'd been trying to persuade Everett not to go through with it. The intrusion had not endeared the guard to Levanna. But now he stepped forward without hesitation and pulled a hand from his pocket. In his palm rested 2 wedding bands, each carved of black regolith polished to a fine gleam. Sort of like this, but it would be like 2 of them. I'm going to put this back on my finger. Thank you. Why do I wear this? They were as simple as Levanna had ever seen, and had never dreamed she would wear. A wedding band made for a guard's wife, not royalty. To be fair, Levanna, unless you're giving him a pay raise with this marriage, that's all you can probably afford. He's got a baby, dude. You know how expensive Pampers are? Shit. Her heart snagged, her eyes misting. It was perfect. Garrison did not look at her as he put the rings into Everett's hands and returned to the pew beside his family. Please take hands and face each other for the exchange. What's the James Bond guy? What am I, fucking Sean Connery? They turned, almost robotically. Levanna inspected Everett's face, and his handsomeness warmed some of the chill from her bones. She tried to express silently how much she loved her ring. It was everything she wanted. That he was everything she wanted. His dark gaze settled on her. She smiled, a little shy. His inhale was sharp, and he opened his mouth to speak, hesitated, shut it again. Then he slid the ring onto her finger and repeated after the officiant. With this ring I take you, Princess Levanna, Blackburn of Luna, to be my wife. From this day forward, you will be my sun at dawn and my stars at night, and I vow to love and cherish you for all our days. Ugh. Her insides trembled, giddiness burbling through her. The smile came easier now, and she stared down at the band on her finger and the slip of gold ribbon binding them together. It did not seem real that morning, that whole day, waiting to see if he would even come. And now it was happening. This was her wedding day. She was marrying Everett Hale. She didn't know if her body could contain the joy throbbing inside as she took the second wedding band from Everett and slid it onto his finger. She paused. Another band was already there, nearly identical and so dark it almost vanished into his skin. She looked up. Everett's jaw was set. I will not take it off, he whispered before she could gather her thoughts. But I will wear both. She looked at the ring again, considered for a half moment, forcing him to take off his old wedding band anyway. But no, this was what he wanted. She would not take it from him. Of course, she whispered back, pushing the band onto his finger until she heard the quiet click of the two pieces of carved rock colliding. With this ring, I take you, Sir Everett Hale of Luna, to be my husband. From this day forward, you will be my sun at dawn and my stars at night, and I vow to love and cherish you for all our days. As the officiant confirmed the ceremony, baby Winter began to cry in earnest. Looking back, Levanna saw that the toddler boy was hanging off the nanny's arms, trying to peer into the baby's swaddle. I just realized, hold up. Garrison Clay is the name of the guard, Everett's friend. And that's their son. That's Jason Clay peering into Winter's swaddle. Okay, I just want to make that clear for everyone that didn't get that, because I didn't until just now. Everett wrapped his hands around Levanna's, regaining her attention. The kiss was a surprise. She hadn't heard the officiant order it, but it was a gentle kiss, perhaps the most gentle he'd ever given her, and it warmed her to her toes. With that, the officiant untied the knotted ribbon, and Everett was hers. A forced wedding is no wedding at all. Not legal in at least 12 states. You gotta check the paperwork, Everett. Baby, listen, buddy. I understand you're trying to do what's good for the crown, but listen, buddy. You can't be marrying this broad like it's gonna be good for your family, okay? You gotta make sure that your house is in order. Otherwise, it's gonna collapse in like a house of cards. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, a good man. Alright, you have a good one. Fuck! Tell me it isn't true! Channery yelled, stomping into Levanna's dressing quarters the next day, wearing little more than shredded ribbons that barely covered what a woman should have covered. Channery looked like an effervescent spirit beneath the glow of the chandeliers, a risque, effervescent spirit. Levanna dared not move as her seamstress whipped her needle and thread over the seam at Levanna's wrist, taking it in. She had made a comment about how Levanna must not be eating well, how she needed to plump up a little to keep a good figure, like her older sister, and Levanna forced her to hold her tongue after that. The seamstress flushed with embarrassment and returned silently to her work. It had since been a very long 2 hours. She glanced at her fuming sister. Tell you what isn't true. You idiot! Did you marry him? Yes, as I told you I would. I couldn't do it. Channery made a furious noise in the back of her throat. Then you will have it annulled, and quickly, before the whole city finds out. I will not. Then I will have him executed. Levanna snarled. No, you won't. Why do you even care? I love him. I chose him. It's done. So love him. Bed him if you like, but we do not marry guards! Channery gestured toward the wall. Beyond it, the whole wide city of Artemisia. Do you know how many of the families I have promised your hand to, and farther before that? There are strategies in place. We need their support. We want them to feel invested in us as rulers. And for that, we need to make alliances. That's how it works, Levanna. That is your only role as a part of this family, and I will not have you ruining it. It is too late. I won't change it. And even if you did kill him, I would never marry him to please you. I would rather die. That too can be arranged, baby sister. The seamstress spooled out some more thread, kneeling by Levanna's ankles. The woman wisely kept her eyes diverted and pretended not to be listening. Then you would have nothing to bargain with, so why bother? Lifting her head, Levanna forced a smile. Besides, I have brought you a replacement princess to be wed off to whoever it pleases you. You will just have to wait another 16 years. Another princess? You mean that child? The baby of a guard and a seamstress? You think any one of the families will want her? Of course. She is my child now, which means she is a princess, as sure as if I gave birth to her myself. By the time she's old enough, no one will even remember that she had another mother, or that Everett had another wife. I suppose that's been your ingenious plan all along. Staring at the wall, Levanna said nothing. Have you even thought what you're going to do with the little brat? What do you mean, and what am I going to do with her? You don't actually intend to raise her, I hope. Dragging her gaze away from the wall, Levanna peered down her nose toward her sister. She will be raised as royalty, as we were. With nannies and tutors, ignored by her parents? With everything she could possibly want. Every luxury, every toy. Besides, she lifted her hands to the side as the seamstress reached the seam beneath her underarm. Everett loves her very much, as do I. This was a lie, and she knew it was a lie. But she also felt that someday it could be true. The girl was her daughter now, after all, and she was a part of Everett, so how could Levanna not love her? Mostly, though, she said it just to watch the annoyance slip over her sister's face. The seamstress finished the seam, and Levanna lowered her hands again, letting her fingers trail over the fine embroidery of her bodice. She felt peculiarly happy today. After spending the second night in a row curled against Everett's body, she was a wife now. Though her dress did not bear half as much skin as her sister's, she felt much more than a woman. She had what her sister did not have. A family. Someone to love her. I hope, Levanna continued, more to herself now, that little Princess Winter will soon have a brother, and sister too. Channery wheeled around her. You're already pregnant? Not yet, no. But I don't see why it would take very long. She had been thinking about it a great deal, actually, often returning to the glamour of Solstice's pregnant belly when she was alone, running her fingers over the taut flesh. She had not really considered wanting a child until she had watched Everett holding his baby girl, seen the softness in his gaze. That was something she could give him too, something that she could share with Solstice. No, Levanna's child would be better than Solstice's, because hers would have royal blood. Frowning, Channery crossed her arms beneath her breasts. That will be one good thing to come out of this, then. When you have a child that is actually your own, then we'll discuss who's best to marry them off to. How I do look forward to those conversations, sister. In the meantime, said Chanry, I am at least doing my duty to further our bloodline without tainting it with disgraceful marriages. What does that mean? Chanry flipped her hair off her shoulder. Little Princess Winter, she said mockingly, will soon have a baby cousin. Oh, fuck. Levanna's jaw fell. Shoving the seamstress away, she gathered up her full skirt and stepped down from the pedestal. You? She glanced at Chanry's belly, but it was as flat as ever. For how long? I'm not sure. I'll be seeing Dr. Elliot this afternoon. Glaring, she turned and headed back for the dressing room's doorway. I hope it's a boy. I am so sick of stupid princesses. Wait, Chanry! She started to chase after her, 1,000 questions in her head, but stopped when her sister wheeled back to face her, face drawn in agitation. Whose is it? The constable's? Chanry scowled. Now what are you talking about? Constable Dabrowski. Is he the father? Chanry's face turned haughty. Reaching out, she grabbed a hold of the half-stitched panel of Levanna's dress and ripped it down, revealing the scar tissue over Levanna's ribs before she could think to glamour it into invisibility. Gasping, Levanna drew away, scrambling to hold the material against her. I have no idea who the father is, Chanry snapped, turning away again. Don't you see, Levanna? That's the point! Okay, so I had the theory that that Winter and Cinder were sisters. That's being dashed away. It's still possible. Unlikely. Chanry could have a miscarriage and then take one of Levanna's kids. In any case, we'll be back with more Fairest next video, my guys. I'm so happy that we're reading this. Holy shit. Oh, there's so much to think about. And she's gonna see. I'm put the volume away. She's gonna see Darnell. She's gonna see Dr. Darnell for her pregnancy, which makes sense because that's how it tips off the doctor to know who to look for with the whole cyborg draft. It's all connected.